It's April 22. It's dark, and Cameron Williams is walking down a sidewalk along a street in Chattanooga. He notices nearby that a car has been pulled over. Inside the car are some young men, and he is hearing an exchange, and he's very concerned, and he approaches the scene of a friendly interaction between these men and a police officer, Chattanooga police officer Buckman, whom is, as Cameron Williams thinks, harassing these young men in a car. This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Walking While Black victim, police victim Cameron Williams. He's 32 years old. He's a bachelor. He's the father of a 10-year-old young girl. He's a hip-hop artist. He goes under the moniker of C. Grimy, a musician here in Chattanooga. Cameron, tell my listener what happened the night of April 22.
First of all, good morning. April 22, had a great show downtown at the Railroad Room. It was awesome. Went to the bar Coyote Jack's and had a beverage. Upon leaving around 1:30 a.m. ish, we see some African Americans in a car, about 4 young brothers cruising the block. It was a warm spring night. The scene was popping. A lot of people were very active. So it was a very social event. We see them hit the block, and as soon as they do, in front of the bar, I see police squad car rush behind them, and I'm like, man, they're about to pull them over. And of course they did. What
could you determine was the reason of that traffic stop?
Well, yeah, when the officer walks up to the window and he says, "You know why I pulled you over? Your tag light is out, and I couldn't see your tag." Which he has a light on a beam on his mirror, and it was a well lit area. It's downtown, street lights everywhere. So, I mean, it was just an excuse. I felt like it was just an excuse to.
It's perhaps legal that if you're involved in transportation, you have to have a little light on your tag. It's legal and justifiable, but it is a pretext in effect. It seems like.
I agree, and so I was like, well, that's pretty petty, and it seems like this is me on the sidewalk voicing my opinion. I said, that's pretty petty.
Now, were you voicing your opinion to the officer at this point?
Yes,
what's happening?
To the officer. My friends and I were on the sidewalk, a safe distance away. And I was like, in the officer's direction, but really in general, to be honest, I was like, man, officers are always picking on African Americans and Latinos, and especially in Chattanooga, and this is unfair. And he looked at me and told me to shut up. That was a direct quote. He told me to shut up.
Did he say, "Shut up, sir"?
No, he didn't. He said, "Shut up." It wasn't in a nice way. And I was like, hey, I have First Amendment rights. I'm not going to shut up. And he then asked all the teenagers for their IDs. And I was like, wow, everybody's ID for a traffic stop? You don't just need the driver's ID? And upon saying that, he put me in handcuffs and said I was...
So he stopped the transportation stop dealing with 4 young people in a car and went over to you
and put me
on the side of the street because you're hassling him, right?
Yeah.
And he put you in handcuffs. What did he say when he did that?
He told me to shut up.
Did he say why he was arresting you?
Yeah, because I wouldn't shut up.
Did he take the time to read your Miranda rights?
I don't recollect for sure, but I don't think so.
Did you hear him read the Miranda rights to the man behind the wheel in the car?
Not at all. Not at all. He was just demanding IDs, and it was about a 40. But from the time I spoke my first words to I was in handcuffs, it was about a 50-second time lapse. So it was immediate. He told me to shut up twice. I said I would not. I have rights, and then I was in handcuffs.
Were you in any way physically blocking or molesting or interfering with the officer's lawful actions, Cameron Williams?
I was on the sidewalk at least 8 to 10 feet away.
Now, the car was not on the sidewalk, nor was the cruiser on the sidewalk.
Not at all. It was...
they were in the street.
They were in the street.
Against the curb.
Evidently. Correct.
Okay, you were on the sidewalk in a public place. Or was that a private sidewalk?
A city sidewalk, I would imagine. It was on 10th Street, 10th and Market, right in front of Coyote Jacks. And so, I mean, it's a public street where people were entering and exiting the building, and people walk all the time. So it's not illegal to be there.
Now, all right, so you're handcuffs. What happens? Does Officer Buckman have support? Are there other officers who are now dealing with the people in the car, the young man in the car, and one is standing next to you, or was he by himself? He has you on the docked on the side, and then he goes back to the driver of the car. What was he doing?
It was himself, and he had a ride along person accompanying him that was watching the whole thing and like kind of taking notes. It was really weird.
Was that Alana LaFleur, the reporter for TV9?
No, it was another lady. It was a different lady. It was maybe a cadet or something like that. But she was riding along, and then about a few minutes later, let's say 5 minutes later, another officer pulled up, and so my girlfriend, she's upset.
She's standing next to you.
She's standing next to me, and she's like, "Hey, what is he being detained for? What's going on?" He wouldn't answer her questions, and he proceeded to put her in handcuffs.
What was the charge against her?
Disorderly conduct, public intoxication, because we had just left a bar, but we were never breathalyzed. We never had our blood taken. We never.
Was she screaming her question or bellowing her question, Cameron Williams?
It was,
or just speaking up so she could be heard.
Speaking up so she could be heard. It was loud.
Over the traffic.
Over traffic, over the commotion. There was people internet, and then once I was in handcuffs, a crowd started to gather slightly.
Now, is your girlfriend black too?
She's African American as well. Yes, she is, and she's a community organizer for Glass House Collective. She does great work, and she deals with the police often, and she's never had a negative interaction until this evening. So now, she was quite upset.
Now, tell my listener, this is David Tulis. We're talking with Cameron Williams. His name came to your attention first, thanks to Alana LaFleur, who had a very important piece on TV News not long ago, and the headline of her report, about a 4-minute report on TV9, "Driving While Black, Chattanooga PD Works with Black Community to Improve Relationship." That's a headline that I think is a bit, doesn't really seem reflected in the story, but it's more of a feel-good headline rather than what is captured initially in the reporting. Now, what happened to the young men? Explain what you understand happened to them, and then how were they disposed of, if you will?
From my understanding, they were let go with a warning for their tail light. But luckily, there was no illegal searches or any further harassment for me speaking up, and I kind of guess I drew the attention towards myself.
Well, did they, as far as you could tell, standing on the side of the street, did those young men, there were 4 in this sedan, did they all remit to the officer their physical documentation, their papers?
They did. They did. The driver certainly did. I seen that, and I'm sure. Did
Officer Buckman make record of these forms of documentation of these other men, the passengers? Did he make a record?
No, he didn't.
Okay. So they were told, just get that light fixed. You're getting off the warning. Then Officer Buckman of the Chattanooga Police Department turns to you, Cameron Williams, hip hop artist. What happens then?
Well, his attention is directly deferred from. I mean, he wasn't even paying attention to the traffic stop anymore. All the attention was on me, and for speaking my opinion and voicing my First Amendment right. And he then proceeded to put me on the back of their car and empty my pockets. And upon that, that's when.
Did he pat you down?
He did.
Did he pat down your girlfriend?
He did.
A male patting down a female? There was no woman officer on the scene?
There was no woman officer on the scene until after we were already in the back of the squad car. So they kind of rough up my girlfriend. They knock her glasses off. She has impaired vision. She wears glasses, and she was trying to get her glasses and not step on them. And she said, "Hey, I need my glasses to see. Can you grab them?" And they shoved her in the car and maced her in the face. They hit her with the spray for trying to bend down and pick up her glasses.
What happened then? Did she fall down? Being maced is a very painful procedure.
She couldn't see, and then they put her in a car, and she was hunched over.
What about the glasses? Are they still on the sidewalk in pieces? Cameron Williams?
They picked them up and threw them in the car, and threw them in the seat next to her.
So you and your beloved are in a car together in the back of a police cruiser.
We're back in the car.
Where do you go? What happens?
We go to jail, and we're charged with disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct, correct. And so we had to bond out. We stayed 8 hours in jail. We had to bond out.
Talk about the bonding process.
We had to get in touch with family members at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and contact a bondsman. We had to pay 10% of a $3,000 bond. So that's $300 per person, Cameron? Plus tax.
$300 per person.
Plus tax and
which is about 10%.
Yes, and maintenance fees for the bondsman.
What does that mean?
That means his fee for doing the transaction with the jail.
So there's a percentage which is his fee, and then he has a fee on top of that. The 10% though, is representative of the whole amount which he pretendedly or ostensibly gives to the court, which I don't think they actually do, but that's the pretense that bonding companies actually pay the court the whole sum, but I don't think they do. But go ahead.
And so and so then we 8 hours later we were released, and they took our cell phones. They didn't put our cell phones with the property, so it took us an additional week going down to the Amnicola headquarters trying to receive our property to get our cellular devices. And that was a rigorous process in itself.
How many trips did you have to make to get your cell phones back? I had to make
3 trips to Amnicola. The first, he didn't properly release the phones with paperwork through the sergeant, and then he was on vacation, so they couldn't contact him, and they were making all kind of excuses, and they just wouldn't release my property.
And what's life like without your cell phone, Cameron?
Oh, you know how much we use our cell phones. We wake up and check the weather, check the news, and start our days. We have alarm clocks.
All your contacts are in your phone.
All our contacts connected to my email, my social media. It's rough. And in the age of no longer, we don't really use landlines. That's most of the time our main means of communication.
Well, this is David Tulis, and we're talking with Cameron Williams. He's a bachelor, 32 years old. He has a girlfriend. He's the father of a 10-year-old daughter. And he's telling us about his arrest on April 23rd downtown. His girlfriend was maced. It seems again the phenomenon of walking while black in Chattanooga. We have the Hanson Melvin case as record before us here on the David Tulis Show, and also at Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor, and also the arrest with perjury involved in both cases of Rochelle Gelpin, who is now living in Birmingham, and who missed the deadline. She had 1 year deadline to file civil claims against the department and Officer Jeff Ron, but that time passed, and she was feckless in her minding the calendar and lost her opportunity to have restoration. But Hanson Melvin has sued the city and Officer David Campbell, demanding $500,000. I'd say a pittance given what happened. $500,000 in damages. Clay Whitaker, the best attorney in town for this kind of thing, is handling that case, and that's the Hanson Melvin case. Well, Cameron, is there? Give me a little bit of view of society in the African American neighborhood. Do black people fear police, or are they glad to see police because now that the officer's nearby, we know that the gangs won't get us? Where's the black heart in Chattanooga vis-a-vis the officer?
Very seldom in African American and Latino communities are we excited to see the police.
But they're fighting gangs, Cameron, aren't they?
I mean, if we can do the numbers, the statistics, there's not a gang problem in Chattanooga. It's a few young people, misguided, who are causing violence with each other. They're not running into stores and schools starting violence. And these so-called gang members, those are somebody's brother and son. And we coming into community and harassing everybody for a small percentage of people is not how you reconcile with a group, a community, and how you make change. Strategically coming together and seeing how we can work together to weed out those who are committing crimes, and doing it the right way is what needs to happen.
Is there any desire among what are sometimes called leaders in the black community? Is there any desire particularly among the clergy, for an abolition of policing? Is there because that is something that has breached the public discourse now? The ending of policing, the post-policing society, enabled, as some suggest, by the rise of apps, by the rise of protective communities through smartphones, where a man or a woman in distress simply pushes the app, and help arrives within minutes of other members of that group, that collective, who come to help, whether it's with a flat tire or a robbery attempt. What our question is, to get back to the question, is there any interest in the black clergy that you know of to look past policing and find alternatives, local economy alternatives to this state enforcement?
African American clergy and community leaders are real and apt to community policing. What we want is support from our city government to look at the police budget and how much we're spending, and how could we invest in some of that in community policing, where the ones who feel responsible for their neighborhoods can be a part of that policing, where we don't have to rely on outsiders to come in who may not be able to relate with those inside of the community.
So the answer is no. There's not really any view among black people for the abolition of policing per se, which is corporate military policing. That's what I'm talking about.
Not at all. We don't need tanks and guys in flap jackets and bulletproof vests running through our neighborhoods all day, every day.
So you're thinking, but it sounds like you're suggesting, though, that black people would like there to be a softening of policing, if it's going to continue as a government operation, a softening of it, a greater community orientation. Is that what you're suggesting?
Community force is needed, but we do not need militarized police. We do not need over policing. We do not need a war on drugs. We do not need a war on poverty. What we need is people to support the community and strategically work with the leaders and those who feel responsible for the community.
What about the prospect, in light of recent police executions of innocent citizens, of disarmament? Is there what would you say about disarmament of police officers? Is that something that's tenable in our day, or is that simply impossible?
I think in the South, it'll be very hard, because it's like the new Wild Wild West. Everybody's got a pistol. Everybody's got an assault rifle. But what needs to happen is there needs to be accountability to force that's used. Every time, the police don't have to pull out their weapon and shoot, and every time you don't have to tase somebody. If it's 6 guys with somebody with their hand up, I think you can find a way tactically to bring him to the ground and get him in cuffs, him or her.
So your suggestion, Cameron Williams, is that disarmament it's premature to talk about disarmament in Chattanooga,
but tactics can be fixed and can be taught better, I believe.
Well, the training for military approaches, combat situations, by one survey by Chuck Wexler, says that officers get about 150 hours of training in that direction, and about 20 or so in de-escalation techniques, negotiation techniques, and in having a treaty, as it were, a treaty with the citizen, so that he doesn't have to be shot, he doesn't have to be beaten, but it's more supple. It often takes longer, especially when the citizen is having a mental episode, as Javario Eagle was.
I mean, more de-escalation and more resolution, rather than going straight to force. And these tactics and these psychological games of aggression is not what's needed.
Well, what is the disposition of your case, Cameron? The criminal case against you for disorderly conduct. What happened there?
It's been resolved. We had to shout out to my lawyer, Mike Holloway, who saw the case, believed in me, and took care of it pro bono. Had to write a letter to the judge and a 30-day warning, and it's been dismissed.
So the case of disorderly conduct for your questioning an officer.
But I had to make it seem like I was in the wrong. But the way I wrote the letter was very strategic.
Okay, so you had a letter. The charge has now been dropped, right? It's now off of the record.
Correct.
And you can say that you've never been criminally charged with an offense.
No, I have to get it expunged. I have to go through that process,
Okay, so
and then I can say
next. Well, and let me ask you just quickly, Cameron Williams, about your girlfriend. She was given a poisonous spray in her face by an officer as she picked up her glasses. How are her eyes doing?
She's doing all right, man. She's doing well.
Cameron Williams, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Cameron Williams, who you first met on TV9 in a very important report by Alana LaFleur, and her headline, Driving While Black, Chattanooga PD works with black community to improve relationship. And we're hearing firsthand about that story. This is David Tulis. Love your neighbor, buy local. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters, looking out for the public good, looking out for you. David Tulis. Now, I've got some important announcements. Do support our advertisers.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital